Hey gang, we are in Topeka, Kansas right now. Beautiful sunny morning. And we're at Rochester Cemetery. Now there's a spooky story here that one of our viewers told me about. Said if I'm coming through to stop by Rochester. And Conrad Youngblom, who is Air Force Master Sergeant retired. Conrad, and by the way, we've got FAU in the house today. Florida Atlantic, Final Four. But we're here to talk about a ghost story here, said to be haunting the cemetery, the Albino Woman, or the Blue Albino Woman, by some accounts. Now, I did some research here. By the way, this will be a fun walk. It's kind of spooky. A little fog in the sun air here today, but we're going to walk to a certain grave. Now, I got two resources. One was the Facebook group that is in this area. It's the Topeka History Geek, and they've got some good information. And then there's a book called Haunted Kansas by a woman named Lisa Hefner Heights. And it's a very good book. I recommend you get it. I read it, and it gives a lot of ghost story accounts throughout Kansas. It covers this story, and what I like about what Lisa did is she takes from A to Z all the accounts, really does a lot of homework. Some are the outlandish stories, which you'll hear, and some are the, hey, well, maybe... or she's unearthed the truth and maybe debunked some things, and it might apply here too. But when we get into some of the other stuff that I heard, well, especially from the history geeks, you guys, it brings up some very compelling information and stuff that we researched, Deb and we found somebody that might be the albino woman who haunts this place. So let's take a walk, and I'll tell you a little bit more of the story of the albino woman here at Rochester. So yeah, she is said to haunt this place, and there's all sorts of crazy stories about her. But if we start with the first of the two references, let's talk about the book. There are, like I said, some outlandish stories, and I'm going to tell you, hold your applause, because some of them are like way out there. But we'll start with that, because they are interesting stories. And the amount of stories on the albino woman here, you can't even count on both hands or both feet, all your toes. There's so many. There's probably 100 stories. And as Lisa has said in her book, these versions are actively and eagerly told here by Topekans of all ages. So, one of the stories about the albino woman here is that there was a middle-aged man who confessed that he did not believe in her, the old albino woman, until he went looking for her 15 years ago. And her albino dog bit him on the leg, and he claims to have a scar to prove it. Another local tale that tells of a murderous attack on an unsuspecting car of teens, loaded with teens. They were there parked probably at some lover's lane, and they say that the door was ripped open. Not only was the door ripped open, but one of the heads of one of the victims was ripped off. Hey, I wonder if we can find that in the local paper. I don't know. There's another tale that I really get a kick out of, and tell me if you've heard this one before, about The phantom in the dark, the misty area of the mirror at night. And if you say her name 3 times, albino woman, albino woman, albino woman, she appears, but she doesn't scratch your eyes out. I think she scratches you and leaves bloody scars. It sounds like Bloody Mary's story to me. It's kind of like Crybaby Bridge, or the bridge where if you push the car at night and you leave it, the children that died there from the school bus that fell in the river push your car and they put powder on the hood or the trunk and you can see the little baby handprints. This kind of sounds... Why do I compare that? Because it's a story that every city in every state, in every county, it's their story. So, all right. So we're going to probably write some of this stuff off, right, as local hogwash, maybe? Well, we don't know. Coming back to Earth, there was a description by one of them, one of the people, and the description came from a 72-year-old woman who is from here. And she said the albino lady is harmless. She was harmless. She was a benign spirit who arises from her grave here in the cemetery and walks the grounds with her little white poodle. So we are getting information here about a poodle. Now, Lisa's research leads to more truthful information, I think. You know, if you get to the end of the chapter, and I'll put the link for her book in the description, but if you look and get towards the end, you'll see a part that's very interesting that talks about a local newspaper writer. It was said to be the first written account of the albino woman legend, and it seems to have appeared in the Washburn University student newspaper here, the Washburn Review. There was a student columnist in the early 70s who did a story on her. He accompanied the story with a not too convincing spirit photograph of a co-ed in a white robe kneeling by a tombstone. Now, he renamed the cemetery here Rockingham, so he either didn't know the name of the cemetery or he took some liberal decision-making. He used the names for his informant, including a cemetery caretaker here called Mr. Sanderson. By the way, the cemetery caretaker was a woman at the time. Oops. Well, later in 1971, near Halloween, he admitted that his column was a spoof. The whole thing was kind of made up. He said that he was found out by a class of junior high students here in town who researched the names. He said, well, let's look this up. So they researched the names that he used, and the people and places mentioned, they were all fake. So he kind of broke down and said, yeah, you're right, I made it up. So, like I say, there's like over 100 versions to this thing, this story here. And kudos to Lisa Hefner Heights for really giving the whole perspective. Now, we go to the history geeks, the Topeka history geeks, and found some more information there. Now, these are the local people. There's a lot of back and forth there. And they identified a woman, a real person here, who maybe fits the description. Thought was very interesting. So I started reading further. And if you read their dialogue, their exchanges, they say that the albino woman lived in the 1800s. And she lived, some say she lived in the 1800s, and some say she lived later, and she actually died in the 1960s. But this earlier version, they say that the albino woman was a person named Phoebe Page. Phoebe Page. And they said that she lived on Page Lane here, a street that was named after her family. It was on the 5400 block of Rochester on the west side, just south of the Horseshoe Curve, wherever the Horseshoe Curve is. And they said that Phoebe was a very nice lady, that she was a giver, she was kind, but people were mean to her. They were mean to her because being an albino, she was mocked. You know, they make fun of her like they would anybody that's different. No one was sure where her husband was. They whispered about her, very sad, but although she was very lonely, she had a child she loved. But you see, Phoebe had apparently lost her child here, right on that street that was named after the family on Page Lane. The poor child was hit by a car and was killed. Phoebe's depression was so great, they say, that she eventually killed herself. Is it true? Not sure, guys. But that is the story that resonates the most. So Deb and I, we did some digging, and Deb found a picture. She found Phoebe Page. Picture with her sister. So I know what you're thinking. You're looking at the picture, you're looking at Phoebe to the right with her sister Florence to the left. You're saying, she's not an albino. Look at her hair. It's brown. Well, let me tell you something, folks. When they took daguerreotypes back in the day, the 1800s, and they took tintypes and all those types of photographs, anybody with light brown hair looked brunette, looked almost black. I'll give you a couple of examples. Look at Doc Holliday. Doc Holliday was purported to have, in fact, not purported, it was testified, it was handed down by a quote from Virgil Earp's wife. He was a platinum blonde. And we look at Doc Holliday, we're like, what? Platinum blonde? No way. You see him in the movies, Tombstone, Wyatt Earp? No. Same with Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp had light brown, sandy hair. Same thing. So that's the way it looks in those pictures, guys. You got to take that into account. So as you look at Florence here, she was probably light brown hair, you know, going by how this all works. And you compare to Phoebe, she had to be white. Can't find her on the grave, though. We have located her grave. She is on Find a Grave. And we are at the Page family plot right here. Now, there are no groundstones here. All we have is this monument. And just coming in the front entry here, it's in section 2. You can find it very easily, Page. But, and I checked all the gravestones around here for names in the ground or up, but all I can find is this. 1841 to 1898, we have John Page. 1840, Elizabeth, wife. 1924, we have 1872, Annie M., daughter. 1923, and another James, a son, passed in 1926. So I don't know. But what I do know is there is a whole, if you step back here, this whole area is unencumbered. This family plot could hold up to maybe 15 to 20 people. I mean, just look around here. And this is common. You don't have inscriptions or headstones for everybody. They're here. But in the records, Phoebe Page is here. I don't know. Is she the albino woman? That's what the history geeks say. They've done their research. That's what they say. Well, what they do say also is she becomes visible when you get too close to this grave, of course, at night. I'm not seeing anything now. She wears a white wedding gown. Her pink eyes glow. She has long white hair with some black showing in it. And they say, if you get too close, she will pull you down into the soil, the very soil in which she is buried here. Well, all I say is, albino woman or not, Phoebe Page, she's here. She's somewhere here. But rest in peace, and rest in peace. But I don't know, I get a shiver in my spine just thinking about it, coming here. Don't come here at night, you're not supposed to, but boy, oh boy, I just try to imagine coming here at night, and I would say, again, as it says, if you get too close to the grave, and she's probably right here, she's supposed to come up and pull you down into the very soil in which she's buried. And I'm standing back here, I am not getting too close. But I ask you, how close would you get to the grave of Phoebe Page?